One of the biggest challenges that patients dealing with mold illness face is the significant cost that comes with treating for mold illness. Both the treatment, the testing that might be involved, home remediation, sometimes needing to move, just cost is a huge, huge factor. And one of the small ways that we can sometimes help put a dent in that is by trying to get around the need to do formal urine mycotoxin testing frequently or regularly throughout the course of treatment. When a patient's suffering from symptoms that we think are mold illness or mold toxicity, and then they get their mycotoxin test done and they see significantly elevated levels of gliotoxin or ochratoxin or mycophenolic acid or whatever it happens to be, then there's this sense of encouragement of like, oh, okay, we know that this is an issue. Let's start treating it, and let's get things better. But of course, along the way, it's nice to know, well, how are those levels looking? Are they coming down? Are we making some good headway? And unfortunately, the testing is relatively expensive. I mean, it's not as expensive as some test panels that are out there, but the cost, at least for us Canadians here, we get the unfortunately more expensive international shipping prices for the lab that we use. We typically use Great Plains Lab in the States. It's $350 US to do a test, so quite expensive. And if we have to if we wanted to do that like every 2 or 3 months to track progress, like, oh man, like that gets pretty expensive. So one of the ways that we can kind of get around that, and that's worked really well in my practice, is combining the urine mycotoxin test with a visual contrast sensitivity test. The visual contrast sensitivity test is something I've made videos about before, but in essence, it's this online test. You look at a series of images with one eye at a time. The images are circles that have vertical lines running through them, and you have to distinguish whether the lines are running straight up and down, veering off one way, or veering off the other way. You do that with 45 images with each eye, and if you get enough of them wrong, then you fail the test. And if you get the more you get wrong, then the worse you fail the test, and it's an indication of there being some neuroinflammation. Mold mycotoxins can induce neuroinflammation, which ultimately causes an impairment of visual contrast, and that's why this vision test has anything to do with mold whatsoever. The limitation of that test is that it's not specific to mold. Anything that causes neuroinflammation could cause a person to fail that test, so doesn't replace the urine mycotoxin test. However, if a patient does their urine mycotoxin test and they have elevated mycotoxins, so we know there's a mold component, then they do a visual contrast sensitivity test around the same time and they fail that test. Say they get 75% of all of the images wrong. Then moving forward, oftentimes, not always, and it's not perfect, but oftentimes we can use that visual contrast sensitivity test as a good tracking tool to see what kind of progress the patient's making. So if, say, 2-3 months after they started treatment, they're feeling better, like, I'm feeling like 50% better, not 100%, but I'm getting there. Well, let's check. Let's do another VCS test, visual contrast sensitivity test, and see how you're doing now. And if, say, on the first test they got 75% of them wrong, the second test they get 50% of them wrong, say, okay, you're making some headway, you're improving, let's keep treating. Say, flash forward another 2 or 3 months, I'm feeling almost all the way better. I've got 10-15% of my original symptoms left. I wonder if I still have a mold issue. You know what, let's do another VCS test. VCS test is about $20, so much less expensive. And so repeat the test. Hey, you know what, I'm passing, I passed, everything's looking good now. Well, maybe at that point, let's repeat the mycotoxin test just to be on the safe side, or depending on how they're doing, patient preferences, all that, the budget, maybe we just call it a day there and we just leave it there with the VCS test with passing that. Or if at that point the patient redoes the test, again, they're feeling 85-90% better, and they redo the test and they fail it by just a little bit. They only got, say, 20% of them wrong. Well, then we know there's probably just a little bit more work that we need to do, and so we keep up the treatment until they're feeling 100% or until they pass the test. So we can use the VCS test, in my experience, in many cases as somewhat of a surrogate mycotoxin test, which the nice thing with the VCS test, inexpensive in comparison, very much less expensive in comparison, and really convenient and easy to do. You could do a VCS test every month if you wanted to. You could do it every week if you wanted to track progress along the way. And I've again found that to be very helpful. So it's just a little sort of a financial hack, if you will, into trying to reduce the cost of testing, and also too. Big advantage of the VCS test, you get the results back instantaneously. Mycotoxin testing, at least here in beautiful Canada, it takes about anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks to get the results back. So we get that real-time data, no pun intended, real-time labs being another major lab that does urine mycotoxin testing. We get the results back right away, so it's just much more deft, if you will, at tracking progress along the way. So I hope this information is helpful. If you have any questions about this topic or anything else, just post them in the comment section below, and I will answer as soon as I have the chance.